You will hear a number of different recordings and you will have to answer questions on what you hear. There will be time for you to read the instructions and questions and you will have a chance to check your work. All the recordings will be played once only. The test is in 4 sections. At the end of the test, you will be given 10 minutes to transfer your answers to an answer sheet. Now turn to Section 1. Section 1. You will hear 2 teachers, Andrew and Katie, discussing the coming excursion of their language class. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 6. Now we shall begin. You should answer the questions as you listen, because you will not hear the recording a second time. Listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 6.
Well, we have this school excursion plan, but when exactly is it? Is it this Tuesday or Wednesday?
Well, it can't be Tuesday with the English tests taking place.
Ah, right, not Tuesday but Wednesday.
That's right, all day Wednesday, taking a bus outside the city.
And where are we going?
Last month we went to Arthur Island, so this time we're going to the animal park.
Arthur Island was okay, but it was too cold. Let's hope the weather for this week's excursion is better. I don't suppose animals care about bad weather, but I certainly do. Have you heard the forecast?
Yes, and it's not too bad. Basically, they're saying Monday will be sunny.
Good.
But then the weather will change.
Not so good.
Yes, Tuesday we'll have some showers, but by Wednesday, the day of our excursion, it will be, well, their words are cold and cloudy.
Cold and cloudy. Well, as long as it isn't wet and rainy, I'm happy enough. We won't need umbrellas, just warm clothing. And what time will we get there?
Let's see, the bus picks us up at 8:30 a.m. and then it's an hour and a half on the road, so we arrive at 10 a.m. Sorry, with the 15-minute break, that will actually be 10:15 a.m.
That's early enough. Then all our students can see the animals, have their fun, and do whatever they want to do.
Well, one fun event planned that day is Birds of Prey.
What's that?
That's when they bring out several birds of prey, eagles, falcons, kites, those sorts of birds, and throw pieces of meat into the air, and the birds swoop down and eat them. It's quite impressive.
Sounds great. Birds of prey. Are there any other activities?
There's a catered lunch at the park restaurant. We've already paid for that. And in the afternoon there's... Well, I had a choice between the reptile display and the koala handling. In the reptile display, the students can handle live pythons and various other snakes.
Surely they'd rather hold koalas.
I'm sure, but the koalas can't be handled unless the weather's sunny, and given the forecast, I thought it better to choose the reptile display.
That's a shame. These Asian students would love the koala handling.
Yes, I know, but we can't control the weather.
And then we get back. What time will that be?
We leave the park at 4:30, but then we face traffic, so we won't get back until well after 6 p.m. It will most likely be 6:30, but that's better than the last trip. We didn't get home until 8:30 that time.
Yes, that was a bit too late, wasn't it?
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 7 to 10. Now listen and answer questions 7 to 10.
Andrew, I understand you've been doing some research regarding the breakdown by nationality of our student body. That must have produced some interesting results.
You're right. I got some statistics from head office.
I would imagine that most of our students are either Japanese or Chinese.
You imagine right. But it's the Chinese who constitute the majority, but only just. I had thought Koreans might be second, but it's actually the Japanese, quite close behind. It's somewhat surprising, but obviously all those study tours that our university markets in Japan are bringing in students.
What's the breakdown exactly?
Japanese are a quarter of the whole, which is considerable. Last year they were only 16%, so that market has grown nicely. The only other proportions of some weight are the Indonesians and Koreans, about the same. Indonesians at 15% and the Koreans are a little higher, not like last year when they were less than 10%.
I thought we'd have more Indonesians than Koreans.
Well, as I said, they're about the same. Just like the Saudi and Thai student numbers, almost the same also, both just under 10.
Which one is bigger?
Thai students number just a fraction more. As for the other nationalities, collectively they're only 3%, so it wasn't worth giving each of them a separate category. I just grouped them under other. That's Vietnamese, South American, a couple of Russians, and so on.
That is the end of section 1. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Now turn to Section 2. Section 2. You will hear a representative from Easy Travel Travel Agency explaining to some customers the benefits of her company. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 15. Now listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 15.
Hello everyone. Now you're here because you're interested in travel, right? And you're in the right place. For Easy Travel we have the best deals for the best locations. We specialize in eco-travel, or holidays designed to get you amongst nature, ignoring the hustle and bustle of big cities. So whether you want to hike in Nepal, as many people do, or follow some jungle paths in the rainforests of Queensland, we can give you the best deal. If you look at our office here, you'll see our overseas consultants. That's for trips overseas, obviously, to Europe, to North America, but primarily for the Asian market, which is generally more popular in this part of the world. Most people like that touch of the Orient, right? But they also like the domestic market, since this country offers its fair share of beautiful natural vistas. What about the deserts, anyone? What about some striking red rock gorges? Then talk to our domestic consultants, who can arrange anything you want. But they deal with the accounts in the morning, so you'll need to talk to them in the afternoon. And remember, our office doesn't open at night, sorry to say. Now, around the outskirts and outer regions of this city, there are many beautiful places that you might not be aware of, and the advantages of these regional locations are many. Mostly by being closer, some of them can be done in a day tour. Yes, it's fast and convenient with none of those long-haul bus trips which often leave you cramped and uncomfortable and stuffing heavy suitcases into luggage racks. But I should tell you about our buses, those that are needed for the somewhat more distant holiday destinations. They definitely do not suffer from those problems I just mentioned. We use the services of the famous Sleek Line Company, whose buses are known as the very best. Yes, they are big, yes, they are comfortable, but what makes them especially different is the personal attendant who accompanies the driver, ready and willing to serve you and ensure that your trip is the very best. So whether it's overseas or local, we can certainly give you what you want. Now, do you have any questions?
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 16 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 16 to 20.
Right, let me orient you to our main Easy Travel office here. On this table right beside us are travel magazines for you to browse through, and on the wall next to that are many more for all parts of the world. Our 4 travel consultants sit over there on the other side of that long counter. That's right, 4 of them, side by side, all serving various regions. Now, let me tell you their specific functions. Firstly, the consultant on the left, next to the plant, is the local tours consultant, serving tours in the immediate vicinity of this city. Next to her is what we call regional tours, targeting the statewide options. Next to her is the interstate tours, and that can involve either buses or planes. In the former case, utilising the Sleek Line bus service, as you know. And finally, next to her in the corner is general inquiries, which is self-explanatory. If you have questions of a general nature, rather than one relating to specific destinations, you can go there. Now, as I said, we can do international tours, and for that you need our big office, just through that door, the one between those 2 plants. However, if your international tour is in the Asian region, which is generally our most popular option, then we deal with that in a separate room, the one opposite international tours, but not the corner one. Just go through that door on the left, the one next to that cupboard. The door next to that is, in fact, our general office, so please don't go through there. That's reserved for staff members only.
That is the end of section 2. You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Section 3. You will hear 3 students, Steve, David and Susan, discussing the different courses they attend. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 26. Now listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 26.
Well, gentlemen, we've almost finished our second semester at this university. What do you think of all the courses we attend?
On the whole, I'd say they're quite good, apart from social history, which I find to be a little too inexact.
Yes, the lecturer's style is also very, very dull.
I certainly agree with you there, although I would say that the textbook is more interesting. Welfare State. The subtitle says, An Examination of Social Development in the 20th Century.
Yes, Welfare State is a good book, but look how many pages it has. 458!
I agree. It's just too long to be easily read. Far too long, although it's certainly well written in parts.
Yes, and if you compare it to the textbook for cultural studies, what's it called?
Inner Views, I think.
No, that's the book for media studies, and we finished that subject last semester. The book you're thinking of is In Perspective.
Oh, sorry, you're right. In Perspective. And the subtitle says, A Comparison of Social Groups. Somewhat interesting, wouldn't you say?
Well, mildly so, as is the subject, dealing as it does with such a wide variety of issues. But the book itself certainly oversimplifies a very complex subject.
I agree. I also got annoyed at its constant oversimplification. Life is more complicated than what it suggests.
Yes, but what you call oversimplifying may well be considered clarifying. Look at this other textbook, Government in Action. Some may say that it also oversimplifies, but it must do so in order to present a coherent picture of an equally complex subject.
Government in Action. Which subject?
It's the textbook for political theory.
Oh, I hate politics. That's why I don't like the active leadership subject either. And most of the stuff in that political theory textbook is based on the American system. You see, it's written by Americans, so it's not even relevant to us here.
I'd agree with you there. It's not relevant to us at all, since our government uses the Westminster system.
Yes, I suppose that is a problem.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 27 to 30. Now listen and answer questions 27 to 30.
Well, it seems we all have certain criticisms about the textbooks we're using, but at the same time we all like some elements, at least, of the subjects we're studying. What's your favourite subject, David?
I'm not sure. I like political theory, but...
Cultural studies is by far the best, even better than political theory, which I also like, but just not as much.
Why do you say that, Steve? I was thinking perhaps social history is worth considering as best.
Social history is good, but I made my choice because the subject is relevant to this modern society.
But so is social history, and I like the historical element, which the other subjects lack. Even political theory examines history only briefly and in a very narrow way, so I'd say social history is the most rewarding for me. What about you, Susan?
I think social history is certainly very good, but political theory is, in fact, the best, since basically every human system boils down to politics. So, despite a certain irrelevancy in the details, the basic message remains as relevant as ever.
Oh, Susan, you can't be serious. Let's ask Olive again. She's over there. Olive! Which subject do you think is the best?
A difficult question. I'm very interested in culture, so cultural studies is certainly my cup of tea. But I'm politically active also, and hope to pursue this as a career. So political theory would be the one I'd pick.
I don't believe it, even with that irrelevant textbook.
Don't listen to him, Olive. You have a right to your own opinion.
That is the end of section 3. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Now turn to Section 4. Section 4. You will hear a lecturer talking about the movement of population towards cities.
Now you have some time to look at questions 31 to 35. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 35.
If you consider the farms of old, the type your father or grandfather grew up on, they were small and labour-intensive, requiring lots of workers. In addition, they often had a diversity of products, be that animal or vegetable, say cows and sheep, or oranges and lemons with some peaches and a few chickens on the side for the production of eggs. The many workers involved raised their families who needed products and support services, such as medical clinics and schools, so the small country towns had mercantile activity, storefronts and community participation with all ages present and a distinct town culture. And how it has changed. Travel to any small country town in virtually any developed country and you will often see that these places are now somewhat forlorn and deserted, lacking life and vigour. Many of the residents have long since moved towards the big cities, so the country areas have become depopulated and their downtowns empty. This phenomenon is so predictable and widespread that it even has a name, rural flight or rural exodus, and it has produced some fairly predictable problems. As for the causes of rural exodus, the most obvious is the industrialisation of agriculture. This comes in two aspects, one of them being monocultural farming practices. What this means is that it is now more efficient to have one product and focus on its needs almost exclusively. So, for example, animal husbandry will usually involve a single type of animal, say pigs, but with huge factory farming techniques, or, in other words, the second aspect, economies of scale. This means instead of 200 pigs, there'll be 2,000, tightly fitted into small pens or cages with high-density waste disposal and automatic feeding systems. Yet, despite this huge size, it can all be controlled by just a dozen farm workers pushing the right button. You might not like it, but in a competitive market, the cheaper the overheads, the better, and one can't argue with market economics. It's simply the way of the modern world, and it has changed the face of rural districts mostly for the worst.
Before you hear the rest of the lecture, you have some time to look at questions 36 to 40. Now listen and answer questions 36 to 40.
We can talk at length about the problem of rural exodus, but what about solutions? Well, there is certainly some cause for hope, since many are now feeling the negatives of increasing urbanisation, negatives which the countryside generally does not have. Thus, tourism, for example, is certainly one avenue of revenue and revitalisation. The most important consideration here is that the local residents themselves participate in developing such initiatives and deciding what happens, since outsiders, be they state government or city-based planners, do not fully understand the local settings. the possibilities which may be on offer, or the town culture, since even small rural areas can be highly distinctive from neighbouring ones. For example, the Daylesford area has developed a tourist industry based on the natural springs there, putting forward the angle that this water is relaxing and revitalising for the health. There has been the development of spas, saunas and small-scale accommodation within its picturesque hillsides. And another solution is to utilise the predominant local product. This takes advantage of the fact that many city people are developing a dislike for factory-produced and packaged foodstuffs. They are becoming interested in products that can be sold directly to them at a cheaper price while preserving all the freshness from the tree or animal. It is important here that the country area is not only characterised by a specific product, but markets this idea well. For example, many areas of country Victoria have developed widespread grape growing and winemaking facilities and encourage wine tasting tourism, now a thriving industry with an international patronage. Similarly, Harcourt is famous for apples, Shepparton for mature cheeses, and Mildura for its citrus products. Such strategies, done well, give hope that rural areas can revitalise somewhat and once again be lively and interesting places to live in.
That is the end of section 4. You now have half a minute to check your answers.